All right, so season 2, episode 3 of The Mandalorian.
Or chapter 11.
Or chapter 11.
However you're choosing to look at it.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of feel the need to say it both ways because, you
Right.
know, some people are really sensitive about that stuff.
Yeah, they're like, no, it's chapter
Yeah,
11.
it's technically, guys, chapter 11. So
Right.
for all of you, you know, picky purists out there, you know, we'll go with that. But it was called the Heiress, right?
Yep.
All right. Well, why don't you tell us, you know, remind us what it was about,
Okay.
and then, you know, we can get into it. We can break this thing down.
All right. This particular episode was directed by Bryce Dallas Howard. And we find ourselves in the Razor Crest, you know, heading to a planet called Trask with the child, the frog lady, who that's everybody just names her the frog lady.
I know.
And-
I know.
and
It's
the
just like the
Mandalorian.
Baby Yoda thing, you know,
Right.
frog lady. I mean, I know she had either they said her species or she had a name or something.
Yeah.
But
anywho, they're on their way to this planet called Trask because she has her eggs and she's trying to get to her husband, and these eggs are the last of her particular, I guess, cycle or whatever, however they kind of call that. So, of course, you know, Baby Yoda's been like picking those things off like left and right since the last episode. And so then now here we are, we're at Trask, and now she's kind of reunited with her husband. They see each other on the dock, and they're like having like this great time. Like, okay, we finally see each other. And so then now we have Baby Yoda still hungry. So
as always.
So, you know, Mando kind of notices him eyeing the eggs again. He's like, don't worry about it. You know, I'm gonna get you something to eat. And so they kind of go into this whole, he's still searching for other Mandalorians. And so he's asking for information. So after that, they kind of go into this bar, and he gets to feed Baby Yoda, and Baby Yoda's kind of eating some what looks to be like octopus or some form of squid or something.
Yeah, that
like
kind of it almost reminded me of a face hugger from Alien.
Yeah, especially when that thing,
especially the way that it latched onto him.
Oh man, that was hilarious.
It was funny, but there was a
Kinda-
first part of me that was kind of like, is this
Creepy,
Yeah,
yeah.
is this like a thing? I mean, is he gonna have to like bust out the flamethrower or what?
It's gonna be roasted octopi in a minute.
That's right.
So, in this particular episode, you see a lot of the Mon Calamari. So you see a lot of that particular species on this particular world. It's pretty much indigenous to most of the aquatic or amphibian-like, you know, characters or I guess aliens, if you will.
Well, I should point out too, and this is true for each one of the episodes we're covering. As you notice, we're basically going in a chronological type of order. So we're talking about episode 3, and we're only talking about episode 3.
Right.
When we talk about episode 4,
no further spoilers.
right, we're talking about episode 4. Now, we might reference episode 3, but you get the idea. The other thing I should point out, this is a total spoiler discussion. So when we get to episode 5, which was the one that came out today, if you didn't see it, then you might want to turn this off.
Right.
Because we're going to be spoiling this one to death.
So eventually, Mando gets the information that he needs to get on this ship, and while they're on this ship, of course, you know, everybody I guess there's been kind of a APB put out pretty much on Mandalorian and the child, and I guess the word got to some of the people on this particular planet, and so now they actually are on the ship, and one of the Mon Calamari. Pretty much, or a Corn, I think that's what he is.
Yeah, he's a Corn.
He's a Corn, yeah.
Yeah,
So
Akbar is a Mon Calamari.
Yeah, Akbar's a Mon Calamari, but this guy's a Corn, right? And
They kind of reminded me, by the way, especially when they're on the actual ship. Mm-hmm. They totally reminded me of the Pirates of Caribbean.
Yeah, that's what, definitely. So yeah, so one of the Corn, dock workers or whatever, was lured Mando and the child over to this whole little trap door, and with this whole, so I think it's called a Mammacore, pretty much had like swallowed up the child because they kind of knocked the thing over into it, and they pretty much wanted to capture the Mandalorian in this whole thing, and so of course Mando freaking out jumps in after it, and they kind of end up trapping him, but then out of nowhere, who shows up? But some of the Mandalorians that he's looking for, led by the one and only Bo-Katan. So now we finally get to see Bo-Katan. She's finally here and rescues the Mandalorian, Din Djarin. And now they're kind of whisked away, and then they kind of start explaining some things. And then, of course, Mando kind of realizes that, okay, wait, you guys are taking off your helmets and stuff. You guys aren't real Mandalorian. She's like, oh, you're one of those people. so, so they kind of had to kind of explain the difference, to him about like, okay, true Mandalorians versus the group that Mando is actually a part of.
Children of the Watch, I think they were called.
Right. So we get that up, we get that kind of squared away. And then, of course, Bo-Katan wants the Mandalorian to help them on their little mission that they have of stopping the Empire, or the remnants of the Empire, pretty much trying to get some of these weapons off this planet. So they enlist the Mandalorian. They stow aboard this whole ship. And in the process of that, they're securing all these different weapons and whatnot. And then, of course, he's doing all this for information on the Jedi. He's trying to figure out, like, okay, where can I find, the Jedi, because I'm supposed to return this child back to the Jedi, but I have no idea where they are. So, of course, Bo-Katan's like, look, help us out. I'll give you the information you need. And so in that particular situation, they go on, storm the ship. It was funny to actually see one of the Imperial officers being a complete coward about everything. But, they kind of pretty much secured the weapons, and then they stormed that.
It reminded me actually of, and, I know you're going through the synopsis now, and then we're going to go back and actually talk about everything. But
yep.
Pretty much that whole cowardly, just the way that whole scene broke out, it totally reminded me of the Vader end of Rogue One thing, in the sense that they were freaking out. They were trying to get all the doors shut. They were, they were doing all that. And that's kind of what that reminded me of, honestly.
Yeah, definitely. And so, of course, as they're, doing all this, the captain of the ship, pretty much, as they're making their way towards the cockpit or the bridge of the ship, the captain of the ship pretty much, what's the word I'm looking for? Contacts. There we go. Contacts Moff Gideon and kind of lets him know, like, hey, look, this is what happened. And so Gideon's like, well, you know what you got to do. Long live the Empire. He bites like its capsule, like in its tooth or something like that, and that has like cyanide or some sort of poison.
Very, very James Bondish.
Yeah. And yep, he just pretty much commits suicide and kills himself, basically because he has knowledge of what's going on. So he didn't want to be put in the position to divulge any information. So after that happens, and the whole point of this is because Bo-Katan is actually looking for the Darksaber. And so because she's looking for the Darksaber, Moff Gideon pretty much kind of figured this out. And so he's like, okay, anybody who can lead these guys to me, has to go. So that's kind of where that ends. So Mando kind of, goes to collect his reward pretty much of information from Bo-Katan. And once that happens, he kind of jetpacks back to retrieve the child that he left with the frog lady, which we all were freaking out about because we were just hoping, like, man, hope this guy doesn't
just like help himself to the eggs like he did in the second episode.
Exactly.
Which actually caused a lot of controversy. In fact, even Daisy Ridley weighed in on it.
Oh, wow.
Which I thought was hilarious because apparently she's a big fan of the Mandalorian show. Which I don't know if anybody knew about that prior to.
No, I didn't know that either.
All this stuff. But, she came out and she was weighing in on it and stuff like that. And, she was kind of making some jokes about it, which I thought were kind of funny. But, yeah, I mean, this episode actually had a lot. First of all, it was refreshing to see this episode because it finally was starting to advance the main story arc.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something I think that we can safely say. Maybe not so much with the fourth episode. A little bit. It's got some nuggets in there. But I think a lot of people thought that the second episode, which, man, I can't remember the name of the title of that one.
The one we first introduced to the frog lady.
Right.
Let's see.
I know you got it.
Yep. Just a second.
Do. People are waiting. But that episode, I think a lot of people thought of it more as filler. You know, I think that people, it even struck me that way. Now, it didn't necessarily bother me that bad, even though I was a little bit disappointed because, they're not releasing these things like the whole season at once.
Right.
They're doing this one episode per week. And the downside of that is that if you get an episode like the second episode, it's kind of disappointing because, oh, okay, I mean, it's cool, but now I got to wait another week until, the new one comes out and I actually get to see, because again, and this is something that you and I have talked about quite a bit before the season even came out. And that's like, look, guys, you have a lot that you're trying to pack into this thing story-wise.
Right.
And even if you're doing 40, 45-minute episodes, which most of them were, thankfully, you still have a lot you have to do.
Yeah. By the way, the episode's called The Passenger.
The Passenger, that was it. I knew it was something like
You're
basic. Right. But, again, people rightfully, I think, in some ways, criticize this for being a little bit filler. Now, I think everybody forgets that the story arc goes across the whole season and even across multiple seasons. But everybody forgets that this is an episodic TV series. It's meant to have like little one-off adventures. Mm-hmm. The problem is I think what people's problem is, don't do that. And Dave and I talked about this a little bit, when he was co-hosting the show. And that was like, don't do it on the second episode.
Well, the problem is when you're dealing with, we get that it's an episodic, television type show. The problem is when you don't have that many episodes.
Too.
You can do that when you have like 24 episodes in a standard television program, and where you can actually, or 22 or 24, depending. Mm-hmm. So you have grace to do that with. Whereas now you only have 8 to get to the main story. I mean, and especially if they're only, now they're 45 minutes, roughly thereabouts. Now you really have to get into the meat of the matter a lot faster because, you only have so many episodes to tell the story.
Yeah, but and of course the other thing too is that one of the nice things about having an 8 or 10 episode season is the fact that it eliminates filler. Because a perfect example is 24. Now we love the 24 series, but they'd have like 3 episodes of like Kim Bauer running through the woods and stuff that, had nothing to do with the main storyline. It's like, you know what? You can cut out like 10 of these episodes because when you have 22 or 24 episodes, you actually feel the need to expand it. Like, okay, we have to cover. So it basically invites filler episodes. Whereas an 8 to 10 season, it's like, no, we got to get like everything becomes important. So I think that that's the reason why people were really surprised that this episode, other than the fact, and I will say this, the fact the Republic knows who Din Djarin is a big deal. Mm-hmm. The fact that they got a little bit into that lore is, to me, somewhat huge, and it was purposely done. And I think that what people are going to find, and I said this to Dave at the time too, what people are going to find is that when you're sitting there at only episode 2, it's kind of disappointing. You're like, filler. By the time maybe you get to episode 7, I think maybe episode 2 will have more weight to it.
Yeah, that's what you would hope for. I mean, I think that.
I mean, it's true. Maybe not.
Yeah,
but, you know what I'm saying, though, right?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, you hope that maybe like they'll call back to something. You're like, oh, that's why that.
Right, like because there are certain things that happen during this episode, like the Republic kind of knowing who he is, and he's on their radar, and it was really weird how they treated him because they saved him from that spider creature, but then,
they didn't help him.
They didn't help him. I mean, they basically left him there to die. And it was interesting that in this third episode, they continued on, and they did it in a more meaningful way. They actually had more meat to the regular story. Now we're being introduced to Bo-Katan, which was kind of a big thing. That was something that they had announced that they were going to do because, again, we know about Bo-Katan. We know eventually Ahsoka's supposed to come into it.
Right.
We know the Darksaber. We know a lot of these big things. Boba Fett. It's like, what are they hiding? And I have a feeling as we go on to episodes 4, 5, and beyond, the big thing, the thing that they haven't been talking about, is going to be revealed. But until then, it was nice in this episode 3, in this chapter 11, to actually have an episode to where not only was it a good, fun adventure, because I don't know about you, but when that Corn just like knocked Baby Yoda right into the, and you're just like, whoa,
that thing jumped up and swallowed it.
Yeah, and you were, I mean, you kind of knew they were going to do something, because that's one of the things I really appreciated. There's a couple of things I appreciated about this episode. Number one, I love the look of it.
Yeah.
I like that gray,
that Camino,
kind of gloomy.
Yeah, it had the Camino vibe to it.
Yeah, Sleepy Hollow kind of vibe to it. Actually, all 3 of these episodes kind of had that vibe a little bit, particularly 3 and 5. But, you know, I really enjoyed the vibe and the feel that this one had.
Yeah.
The other thing was, it was ominous. You know, you kind of felt in danger. And I like that.
Yeah, I mean, you know, one, just seeing them on the ship and, you know, they're away from kind of like land or whatever, you know, like, you're kind of in these guys' elements, really, because, you know, like I said before, the Mon Calamari, you got the Corn, you got a lot of these creatures that are, you know, this is their natural habitat. So, like, being in the water is, you know, home for them, no different than sand people in the desert. And so the thing is that Mando's not really suited for the water. One, he's got, like, you know, probably 30 pounds of steel on.
Or more.
That
Beskar is probably kind of heavy.
Yeah, and then on top of that, you know, you got this child with you. You got a helmet on that you don't want to take off. So it's like, you know, if you get knocked into that water, like, how do you really, you know, survive? You can't really survive too long in that thing. So, yeah, I mean, it was very interesting to see him out of his element or in a position where he didn't have necessarily all his resources.
Absolutely.
But then, like, you know, like, I was wondering how he was going to get out of that stupid thing.
Yeah, completely. I mean, it's one of those situations where you actually are like, you know what? I don't see a way out for this guy.
Exactly. Yeah, and I like that because, you know, we like seeing our heroes kind of like in a perilous situation. And of course, for once, you know, if it hadn't been for Bo-Katan, that could have been it.
That could have been it. And the thing that was interesting was even before that scene hit, before, you know, the child was knocked into the water, even before that, you could tell something was off.
Yeah, you knew something was about to happen.
And I love that feeling. And I love the fact that they so successfully gave us that feeling, because something didn't, you almost were put into his shoes, or boots in this case, you know, in that sense, because you knew something was going to happen and you were trying to feel it and you were trying to, you know.
Yeah, just kind of get us. You got your spidey senses are kind of like tingling almost, if you can use that terminology.
Yes. It was one of those things where you knew the danger was there, but you didn't know where it was.
Yeah, like I didn't know if there was something in that thing, or if it's just they were just gonna push him in there and lock him down in there, or like the fact that I just thought they were just gonna shove him down there and just kind of trap him, but I had no idea like this. But then it's all this. Yeah, let's see him. Let the child see this thing, you know, get fed. Or whatever.
Yeah.
And I'm just kind of like.
But you know what's funny about that? I actually didn't think anything of that. Like, you would think that would be the big clue. But for me, I was like, okay, yeah, cool. They're letting the kid, you know. I
was kind of wondering because I'm like.
It was like out of nowhere to me when he was knocked in.
This thing is like an infant. Like, it's like an infant. Like, okay. What is this thing really going to remember? Like, if you really think about it. I mean, granted, yeah, he's 50 already, but. You know,
they don't know that.
They don't know that exactly, and so I'm like, okay, you're looking at this thing like it's like a newborn. So how are they gonna? That's what tipped me off. I'm like, here we go. So, yeah. Then they said we're gonna feed him. I'm like, they're gonna feed one of them to this thing, and I thought they were just gonna feed the Mandalorian to it, and then try to keep the child. That's what I thought was gonna happen.
See, and that was exactly where I thought it was going too. I thought it was gonna be one of those situations where, they were going to try to kill him, and that they were secretly working for Gideon. Or maybe they just knew, because, you know, there is a bounty on these two.
Exactly.
Or at least on the child. So, yeah. Yeah, and that's one of the things that was so cool, and that's what made the entrance of Bo-Katan and the other two Mandalorians so special. Now, another thing I thought was interesting is that you saw Sasha Banks.
Mm-hmm.
We saw that trailer scene.
Yep, her on the docks.
Her on the docks. And, of course, this is the big moment that we're going, okay, is she playing Sabine?
Mm-hmm.
Because, again, we're like, okay, it would make sense for Sabine to be in The Mandalorian.
True.
Now, of course, we found out very quickly that she's not Sabine. In fact, I forgot what her character's name was.
I don't think they gave it to us, though.
Yeah, they said they introduced themselves. But, I mean, honestly, for me personally, I didn't really care. It's one of those things that if those two rise to prominence again, like if they're featured in some more episodes, then I'll commit. This is one of those things where it separates both of us from a lot of, like, the hardcore Star Wars fans. Even though I consider myself a hardcore fan, because let's face it, I've read a lot of the comics, the books, the movies. I'm doing a show. I mean, if you're committing to doing a show every week, you're probably a pretty big fan. But I'm one of those guys, though, that I was more about it as a kid, especially when I was collecting the figures and stuff like that. But it's like as I got older, I didn't necessarily care about memorizing every name of every character and every vehicle and every this and every that.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? It's like when you're an adult, you actually have other things that you have to remember. And being that I'm very involved in production, it's like there's a lot of things I have to try to keep up on.
Definitely.
Minor Star Wars characters is really, to be honest, not on my radar. So it's one of those situations where if those two come up again, then, maybe, yeah, okay, I'll figure out who they are, right? But for now, I haven't. But knowing that they're just minor characters, even though I will contradict myself in a way, because I will commit to it if I realize that this is a character from the old expanded universe.
Well, that's because you've already kind of committed that anyway.
Well, yeah.
It's already kind of like...
Well, yes and no, though, because it could be a character that maybe it was from a book I didn't read, or they were a minor character even in the book. But the fact that they were an established character, then I would probably pay a little bit more attention. Until then, though, it's like, I mean, I don't want to say I don't care, but I'm not as invested in that particular bit of trivial knowledge, as it were.
So Sasha Banks' character is Koska Reeves.
Yeah, okay, that's right.
That's her name.
So, what about the other dude?
The other Mandalorian?
Yeah.
Let's see.
But while you're saying that, I thought that their entrance was great. I thought it was fabulous. I thought that if you're going... Because one of the things, of course, that we were always wondering is how are they going to bring these guys in?
Yeah, I mean, now, one thing I will say is that, and I'm going to get your opinion on this, did she... Like, I was marveling at the fact that she really did look like Bo-Katan from, like, the Clone Wars.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Like, I mean, they got her, like, spot on. Like, it was literally like a live... Like, she just, like, stepped out of a cartoon or something, and it was like, yep.
Well, and I think it begged the question, too, like, I know a lot of people were... Once it was announced that Ahsoka would be brought into live action, and then Rosario Dawson's name was thrown out there as being officially cast, I remember I was jumping for joy because she was the one that, like years ago, while the Clone Wars was actually still on, by the way, because Rosario Dawson actually came onto my radar from Josie and the Pussycats, of all things, believe it or not. And I'd seen a couple of her other movies, and, I always respected her as an actress, but I always thought once I saw the character in the Clone Wars, I'm like, man, if they ever brought her into live action, that's the actress that should play her. Now, a lot of people were upset that, unlike Katie Sackhoff, they did not ask Ashley Eckstein to portray the live-action character.
Right.
And it's like, maybe they could have made her look like the live-action character, but, seeing a lot of the production stills and all that stuff.
Yeah.
I just think that it's a smarter choice to actually go with somebody, because there was a lot of talk of, are they going to have Ashley dub the voice? Kind of like what they did to Ray Park, where he played the character of Darth Maul, but he didn't do the voice. Mm-hmm. And that could have been something they could have done, but that would have been kind of cheesy, I think. Ronaldo says, it is my second favorite episode. That Mandalorian armor translates well to live action, and the action was very well handled. Yeah, I totally agree. It was amazing, first of all, how well, like you pointed out, that they actually did get. I mean, it was literally like
she walked off.
The animated version just walked off of the drawing or the computer or whatever and right into live action.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so rare that you can have a voice actor. I mean, granted, I know Katie Sackhoff is actually an actress. It's not like she's just a voice actor, but at the same time, the look, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
It's very rare that you can have somebody who does the voice acting actually nail the look of the character.
And you almost have to wonder, like, did they model the character's look after her?
I would think so. I would think so only because she's a known actress.
Mm-hmm.
Who, ironically enough, and I didn't know this, I knew she was in it, but I didn't know it was her first movie. I did not know that Halloween Resurrection was her first movie. And she doesn't look as recognizable. There's this hilarious video on YouTube, because she has her own YouTube channel.
Okay. And
she did a reaction video to Halloween Resurrection, which was great. Like, she was telling some stories, like, behind-the-scenes stuff, and then, you know, like, okay, this is a decision I would make, but I didn't know. I was new, and, you know, it was really cool. And it was nice to see her just, you know, she's not made up. She's just, like, in jeans and a T-shirt. She's just looking normal. Right. You know, and it's great to see an actress like that. And that's why it was really nice that she was able to portray this character.
Oh, yeah, definitely. One of the things that, you know, I loved about this episode was that you had different types of, different types of Imperials. So you had, like, the captain, very stern. He was very by the book. You can tell he was really into the military aspect. The other guy in the back of the ship looked like he was just drafted, and he was like, look, I'm not even trying to be here. You know?
Well, but again, and you bring up an excellent point. I'm glad you did, because I wouldn't have thought of this otherwise, but you do start to see now the different various levels of devotion to the Empire, that there's a lot of these guys that are not, it's not as two-dimensional as what they were portrayed in the trilogies.
Yeah.
Because the original trilogy in particular, because that was the Empire, right? So you basically get this almost black and white type villain. They're all ultra devoted to the Empire. It was almost like this Nazi regime, which is what it was modeled after. So naturally, the officers were modeled after that too. Although it should be pointed out, there were a lot of people in Nazi Germany who, you know, they really weren't clued in, or they were purposely just sort of looking the other way. They weren't overzealous for the cause, let's say. They were doing it because either they had to do it or it was a job.
Right.
You know, I mean, this is what you're doing. This is what your nation's doing. So, okay. And I have a feeling that that's what it was like in the Empire, too. But now we're seeing that. It's 6 years after the Empire fell. Some of these guys are probably like, you know what? I don't know if I'm 100% on board with the mission, but you know, what else am I going to do? Where am I going to go?
Right. What
I mean,
job do I have to
and I think,
for?
Yes, and I think that the most important point here is the fact that they wanted to maintain order.
Yeah.
Because it was in, that was probably an episode 4 thing, so I'll hold that off.
Okay.
I'll hold that off. But it's interesting that, no, it wasn't. It wasn't. It was episode 1. It was the whole Cobb Vanth thing. As soon as the Empire fell, boom, these pirates just take over the town. Like, they're still announcing it on television. And these guys are like, all right, Empire's gone, we're taking over. And this is a very real thing in this universe that, you know, they have to deal with that. And so for some of these people, they might not necessarily, first of all, not everybody's privy to the whole Moff Gideon. He's got the Darksaber. He's trying to create whatever he's trying to do. You know, I mean, whatever his ultimate plan is, a lot of these guys weren't clued in on it. Yeah,
Ronaldo makes a good point too. He says, it seems to me a nice touch that the pilots...
We'll get through it. We'll get through it.
That the pilots of the ship were young and fearful. That shows that the Empire lacks experienced members after its defeat.
Yeah, that is a good point, actually, because, again, they're pretty much almost in the same boat that the Rebel Alliance was in when they started. Where it's kind of like, okay, anybody that has any flying experience at all, like half of them were farmers.
Yeah, it was like the Independence Day
Is
thing.
basically, yeah, like Independence Day. They just didn't go through with the whole, anybody that knows how to fly. I mean, but that's essentially what it was.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you had maybe some people that were experienced from the Clone Wars and, they were part of the Republic or whatever. But, most of those guys were just farm boys or, recreational flyers, maybe a couple of smugglers here and there. Who knows? But the point is most of them were just from other walks of life that believed in the cause.
Yep, or just needed a job, honestly.
Yeah, or just
especially
needed a
after
job.
the Empire fell. It's like, okay, well, I need something.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a reasonable conclusion.
Yeah.
And I think that one of the things that they're doing this season that's very good, that has been continuing throughout the season actually, is portraying these people as like, look, they're not necessarily believers in the cause. They're there for the paycheck.
Yeah.
Or that's all they know.
Mm-hmm. Now, even watching, not the Mon Calamari, the Quarren, like they're more of the aggressive, dark, seedy kind of creatures of the aquatic world, if I may. And they've always kind of been portrayed as that, even in the Clone Wars animation.
Mm-hmm.
When they had that whole, I guess, series of episodes where they were trying to win that whole battle, and they were working with the actual, not the Trade Federation, but the Separatist movement. So, I mean, just seeing that actually, once again, transcribed to live action, where you kind of get that they really did look like the Quarren that we saw from the animation, and they really still had that same attitude. It's not like, oh, this is a certain group of them. It kind of seems like they're all like that. Like they're all kind of just these grumpy squids, that just kind of...
Well, and again, I think that one of the nice things what the Mandalorian is doing as the seasons, because they started this basically in one, but it has been progressing, and that is that they're really taking the lore and they're expanding it.
Yeah.
And they're expanding it and taking it into new directions. So you're really getting the best of both worlds. You're getting a little bit of the nostalgia, but you're getting that new direction. And I think that ultimately, even though nobody really thought about it or at least expressed it that I saw, because usually you have two camps. You have people that want to see the continuing adventures of all these people, and then this one's the son of this one, and on it goes. Or you have people that are like, no, let's go in a completely brand new direction, clean slate, brand new characters and everything else. The Mandalorian actually did the best of both. It's giving us the familiar, but in a new setting, with a new set of circumstances, and it's expanding on characters that maybe we saw in other medium, but never really got to see in this context.
Right. Almost kind of what we wanted to see in the sequel trilogy.
Yeah, imagine that. I mean, honestly, yes. The Mandalorian essentially is how the sequel trilogy should have been handled.
Right. Now, when going back to this episode, I like the fact that they changed Baby Yoda's perspective on the eggs. Because before he just kind of saw them as food, and then now it seemed like he started to understand what they were and who they...
He's probably thinking like, "Oops."
Yeah, but he's all like trying to play with them now, and like the frog, and the fact that the frog family pretty much are just, they're kind of embracing him and just kind of like, yeah, we'll watch out for him. And
I'm waiting for the sitcom.
I know, right?
You know what? That was almost getting to me. Like, it was giving me holiday special flashbacks, though. I'm like, okay, are we going to see these guys speaking in their little frog language for like 20 minutes?
Right, exactly.
I mean, this is going to be a little bit strange.
The
but
Empire knocks on the door.
Right, yeah, exactly. Is it Life Day?
Right.
Or whatever it is for the little tadpoles. But yeah,
Pool
I mean, it was really cool. It was great to see that because, again, these are the kinds of things that we don't get to see too much. It's a we've talked about Ahsoka's growth because she's really the only character in Star Wars that you see from pretty much the very beginning. And I know a lot of people might be tempted to say Luke, but Luke was already kind of who he was.
Yeah, and he was already like 17, 18 years old when we first meet him.
Yeah, where, Ahsoka's probably more like 14, 15, maybe even a little younger.
I think she's probably like 12, honestly.
Or 13. Yeah, she could be. Ronaldo.
Yeah, I really thought he was going to eat that tadpole.
I did
yeah,
too.
we did. And I think, and I remember there was like a lot of backlash about,
oh yeah,
him eating those, eggs, and everybody was kind of like trying to boycott Baby Yoda all of a sudden. And it's just like, he went from the most beloved, cutest thing in the world and
cancel culture, man.
Yeah, man. Like he's about to like Times Magazine.
The SJWs are out there.
Time Magazine's like, Creature of the Year or something like that. And then all of a sudden, everybody's just like, oh no, burn Baby Yoda,
Well, and this could actually be the topic. Like, we could do this as a main topic of the show, but it used to be that Star Wars was somewhat isolated from the more social norms of, whatever the society might be at the time.
Mm-hmm.
But you're starting to see through a lot of things in The Mandalorian and a little bit that it's not isolated.
Well, I mean, George Lucas always kind of wanted that to happen anyway.
Well, in representative, but I'm talking about like, okay, Baby Yoda eats some eggs, and now everybody wants
him taken off the show.
Yeah, or like Gina Carano posts some comments that people don't like, and suddenly they want her fired.
Well, yeah. Well, I think that's just because these things are accessible to people now. So yeah.
Well, and that's one of the. I guess that's one of the more downsides of social media is that you can look and, one of the things that it does, and this is why I always say that it is good when actors aren't necessarily too involved in it because, and it was something that somebody, I don't remember who it was, said this, but an actor basically said that if you know too much about them, it takes away their ability to fully be able to portray a character because now you're not seeing the character, you're seeing the person.
Mm-hmm.
So,
definitely.
Yeah, that if you're too active on social media, it's like on one hand, yeah, you want to be accessible to your fans, but on the other hand, you don't want to be too accessible or too known because it bleeds in. But it just goes to show you, though, that, things are nobody's just saying, hey, this is... Because you're right, the whole Baby Yoda thing, they were really...
Yeah.
Even though for me, and I remember when we did the review on the episode, I mean, it was kind of dark. I remember watching it, with one of my friends, and he was like, he's going to eat the eggs. I'm like, oh, no way. I'm like, no way. That would be too dark and too grim. They're not going to go there. And then they went there.
Multiple times.
Like, and they did it, like, probably 40 seconds after I made the comment. I'm like, oh, well, I guess they are going to go there. And it was interesting because it shows you that, first of all, it makes perfect sense why he would do it.
Of course.
I mean, everybody's like yapping about that, but it's like, yeah, you're about to go to the store and buy your eggs. Where do you think they're coming from? Yeah. Now, granted, you're not hanging out with a chicken, like, eating their eggs in front of them, and they're not as they can't use universal translators and
so. But here's the thing, though. I mean, and this is one of the cool things about Star Wars. Like even in the Mandalorian, okay, we've seen definitely the growth of the Mandalorian himself.
Mm-hmm.
But in a way, you can kind of say you've even seen the growth of Baby Yoda.
Absolutely, and I think you're going to continue to
see. Yeah, and I think you're going to continue to see that. Because I think it's almost becoming as much of his story as it is the Mandalorian's.
Oh, I don't doubt that that's where they're going to take it. What's interesting to me is, and I've often said that this whole thing about whatever the Empire's planning for them and, all these things, I think that's going to be wrapped up at the end of this season. But what's interesting, I could be wrong though. It could actually go another season, but I don't think it's going to. But I do think though that they're going to now take all this stuff and then go to the next level and see the next level of growth for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And I like the fact that so far, you see people coming in and out. Because one of the problems that I always had with the Batman series, let's say, the movies, is the fact that, they were bringing in all these characters, and it's like, okay, now you got to give the origin story to everybody. You have to do all this stuff. By bringing in characters that will show up, and then they're not there for the next episode.
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe they come in later. They did that last season.
Yep.
So I think that that's cool because you're keeping the focus on Din Djarin and the child. Mm-hmm. And it's going to be ultimately about their journey as individuals, but also their journey together.
Right.
And then people that we know and love and people that we're introduced to, like a Grief Karga, they're going to come in and out as the story dictates. But it's not like they introduce a character and all of a sudden now they're in every episode too. I like the fact they're not doing that.
Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail right on the head. The fact that they can kind of bring you in and then that allows you to see their growth and development over time, man. Mm-hmm. We'll talk about that in some other episodes we have coming up. But yeah, you really do get a chance to really see, and I think that's the whole thing about Star Wars too, is one of the things is it's always been about growth. When you look at Luke Skywalker, you look at Princess Leia, Han, they all grew, in their own respective ways. Leia, learned not to be so hard and so tough. She knew how to be sensitive when she needed to be. And then she still kept her strong will and her determination. You saw Luke actually grow from being like kind of an annoying little scrawny kid farm boy to like a strong, confident, young Jedi Knight. Han wasn't so selfish. He grew into being someone more compassionate. You saw the softer sides of him later on. So, I mean, I think that, like I said, Star Wars has always been about that growth. Even Lando, saying you saw different things with him.
I think Lando was actually one of the biggest. I mean, you can point to any of the other characters like you just did, but I think Lando was probably the most obvious.
Yeah.
Because first of all, he was introduced like in the middle of the second act, and then of course he carries into the end of the third act. But the thing is that yeah, he really went through, I think, a lot of growth, even though it's interesting because you don't really see it until you see Solo. Because then you get a little bit of a vibe of what Lando was like beforehand.
Yeah, I mean, but when you kind of even see the fact that he kind of had it all, like he was the guy running Cloud City, he was like pretty much.
He had it all till the Empire took it from him,
and that's what I'm saying. So then it's like, okay, now he kind of had to fight for everything now that he wanted, and he still maintained his kind of savvy, slick ways of acquiring certain things, or
he's basically like the other side of the Han coin.
Yeah.
His growth is actually very much like Han's growth. Mm-hmm. And it also mirrors Finn in a lot of ways as well.
Yeah.
Because
to find their place.
Yeah, they're trying to find their place, or they're basically on. Now in Finn's case, he was trying to run away from his past and forge something new, and then he got pretty much roped into this cause, and then he realized this is where he needed to be. Whereas Han and Lando were pretty much accidentally, had this cause pretty much run into them, and then they had to make the conscious decision: do they go and
stick with it?
Yeah, or do they stick with it? Do they say, you know what, I need to do something bigger than myself? And of course, they chose the latter, so that's why we get that. And you see, of course, Lando's growth even further once you hit The Rise of Skywalker.
Definitely.
So yeah, that part's cool. I mean, I just think that they did a really good job in this episode of finally giving you a little bit more meat because, they kicked everything off so well. Mm-hmm. I mean, they gave us basically episode 1, boom, Boba Fett, Cobb Vanth, who's like, from the Aftermath trilogy. So they're giving you like canonized new novel stuff, and they essentially told his story in a slightly different and abbreviated way. I mean, it was great. Mm-hmm. And then you get The Passenger, and you're like, okay, it was, I guess, from a standalone episode point, it was cool, but there really wasn't a whole lot that happened, and it wasn't really necessary that we know of.
Well, I think the biggest thing was like the whole New Republic, actually, because showing up and
Yeah,
doing
and that
all
was the
that.
purpose of it. And it's so funny too because and John Campea never fails to shock me. He loved that episode. He thought The Passenger was like the greatest thing. And he had a lot of good points in defense about it. Which really amazed me because I'm like, oh, he had to have hated this thing. He's going to call it filler, all this, but he didn't. And he actually pointed out a lot of things, some of the things that I had already pointed out. And then he pointed out some other stuff too. And, because another thing that you see in The Passenger is the fact that that's the first time you truly see the child bonding with Din.
Yeah.
And that there's really a legitimate bond there. And then it's going to grow from there. But you kind of see that. And then, of course, that's spilling over because we didn't really mention this at the beginning of this, but episode 3 or chapter 11 is really a direct sequel. You really have to think of 2 and 3 as one big episode.
Mm-hmm. And I like the fact that, like, in the Heiress episode, even with it's cool how like Mando kind of like meets people, and then he kind of just, all right, they usually have him do some sort of job for them. Like that's kind of like the theme, like, all right, meet somebody new, got to do another job for him, and then it's like, all right, what do you need me to do just to get the information?
Yeah,
I want?
what's weird? You know what the if you really stop and think about this series, you know what it's like? It's like these RPG games.
Mm-hmm.
So you're playing, say, Elder Scrolls, right? And you have the main quest. But then along the way, you might meet some people, and in trying to do the main quest, you have to do these side quests, so that way you can get information for the main quest.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much how it is. He's like, okay, just go, see this person or whatever. Well, then you go to meet them up. They're like, okay, well, I'll give you the info, but I need you to do some for me first. And that usually takes them either to an entirely new planet or something else. And this passenger thing is a perfect example.
Well, yeah, like even with, the Heiress is like when he's meeting Bo-Katan and, they're all sitting around and she's kind of explaining everything to him. Like, okay, well, you had this faction of Mandalore that was doing this. And then, we're from Mandalore. We don't do the whole, not removing the helmet thing. Like that's, you guys' whole deal. And, just kind of break it. And I like how they kind of broke things down, but they still ended up respecting each other. Like, okay, even though we're from two different styles of Mandalore, so to speak, I still respect you. And they actually were able to, accomplish this mission together. And then, you kind of saw Mandalorian, man. He was actually like taking some shots, like as he was trying to like let those detonators go. I mean, that Beskar steel, man, was holding up. I'm just like, I'm like,
yeah,
I'm just
well,
glad
and
he's got
that's the other thing that I like too. I like it when you see him really just kicking a bunch of butt. Like you see that he actually is a skilled fighter. Because sometimes, and this is one of my complaints in the first season, and I brought it up in some of those reviews. It's like you're underpowering this guy a little bit. I mean, I get it. You're trying not to make him, the Mandalorian version of Luke Skywalker or something.
Or
but
RoboCop or something.
yeah, exactly. Like you're not trying to overpower him, but come on, man. I mean, you can't make him that. He's obviously like this really highly skilled bounty hunter.
Right.
So you have to give him that. And I really like that Bo-Katan scene because it was something that we had always thought of. It's like, well, wait a minute. Because remember, we thought that the reason why they didn't take their helmets off was because this is after the Purge. Mm-hmm. They were driven extremely underground. You had all these different things, so we thought that's what it was. And then it's like, no, that's not it at all. So that was a surprise to me. And then it was great that they gave that little bit of exposition. So, and it's not just to Din himself, because it's giving him a little bit more pieces of his past and where he's from, but it's also giving the audience, like, hey, this is why these guys aren't taking off their helmets, but remember us from the Clone Wars?
Yeah.
We're still kind of how we always were. And you're right. They totally nailed their look, and it was just priceless, man. It was great. I loved it. So if you had to rate this episode,
I would give it a out of 10.
Yeah,
I'll give it an 8.
that's about where I'm at too.
Yeah, I'll give it an 8. Yep.
I mean, we could have duel the fates it, but no, I would too. I would give it a solid 8, man. I think that it advanced the story arc, which I think that we were at the point where we really needed this to happen.
Mm-hmm.
It introduced a character in a way that could have sucked, but actually was done very well. It gave us a really good adventure. It gave us some more information. I mean, it was really a nice, well-rounded...
It was packaged well.
Yeah, it was packaged well. Now, let me ask you this, though. Were you disappointed that Sasha Banks was not Sabine?
Yes.
Now, do you think that they can actually bring Sabine in still?
They could.
I know, you're just like, well, they can do anything.
Yeah,
I mean, it's true, but I mean...
I think they still could. I mean, because, see, I could see it happening because you still have that fight for the battle of, like, okay, who leads Mandalore then? Is it going to be Bo-Katan or is it going to be Sabine? You could still bring that in. Like, they both could be hunting for the Darksaber.
So what do you think are the... what percentage would you give it that they bring her in?
I'll say 40.
I will go 60, but I don't think they're going to bring her in this season. I think it'll be a season 3 thing.
Okay, I can see that.
I would say 20% on this season, maybe even 15.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Like, I thought you were talking about like this season.
Yeah, I know. I didn't clarify it.
Yeah.
And Ronaldo basically gives it an 8 out of 10.
Yep. So he agrees with us.
He agrees with us.
He agrees.
I would like to say it's a shock, but Ronaldo's always in there with us. Although sometimes he agrees with you a little too much, but I'm going to let that go.
Ronaldo's my guy.
Exactly. You're like PayPaling him, every week or whatever.
Your Cash App will be ready, Ronaldo.
But, as usual, let us know in the comment section what you guys thought of this episode. I realize this is like 2 weeks after. Like, every other YouTuber in the world did their whole thing on this episode like 2 weeks ago. But, hey, we're the ones that actually get in and really discuss it. They just kind of give you, a bunch of stuff. Or then there's people that do the Easter egg videos, which I love to watch. Mm-hmm. But I'm just not that guy. I can never make one of those videos. Because you got to go like frame by frame and
we stay in our lane.
Oh yeah, we're the Star Wars philosophical character study discussion channel. So again, let us know in the comments section what you guys thought of episode 3. We're gonna of course move on to the other episodes, which you can still chat what you guys think of episode 3 because it's a cumulative thing. Mm-hmm. So let us know, and that'll be that. What do we got next?
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter @HeadToHeadSW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the Force be with you, always.